Like what's really like going through your head? Like what are you like sitting there and telling yourself about
Stay calm.
stay calm?
You don't want your cortisol levels to screw up. I've seen guys look phenomenal the night before a show, and the next day their body is washed because they get nervous. When I'm backstage and I'm pumping up, I have my music in, for the past couple of shows, my coach is always with me to keep people away from me so that I can just focus. And what I do is I focus on making sure I hit all my mandatories. I'm not shaking. You want your posing to look effortless when you're on stage. You also want to be the first one in your pose, and you want to be able to hold it. Because typically the first person in their pose, that's where the judge's eyes go. So you're the first one. If you're the last one, if you're taking your time and all of that good stuff. I've had an experience when I did the Pittsburgh in 2017, I was taking too long to get into my pose. Right when I got into my pose, the judges were calling the next one, and it was just throwing me off. They ended up moving me to the outside, and as you guys know, that's not a good thing when they put you on the outside. But I was able to regain my composure, hit my last couple of poses, and they put me right back into the middle. I would just say stay calm, relax, listen to some music, some soothing music, and then just envision yourself hitting every pose to the T. Good? Mm-hmm.
So I have a question in regards to when you cut down. So I'm doing roughly 8 weeks. When it comes to like the calorie deficit, how many should I knock off per week?
Well, yeah, they're only difficult questions because everybody's body is different, right? If I was working with you, I'd be able to know exactly what to do. But one thing that I've learned in bodybuilding in particular is you don't want to change more than one variable at a time because you want to know how your body responds, right? Because sometimes you don't need to lower your calories. Sometimes you need to increase your cardio, or you need to increase your intensity when you're training, lower your rest periods. So my advice to you would be, when you're at that point in your process, make one change, whether it be maybe drop your calories or increase your cardio, and see how that works. The last thing you want to do is decrease calories, right? So I always tell people your off season is your springboard into your prep. The more you can eat in your off season, the more you can eat in your prep, right? So if you're not eating enough in your off season, then you typically have to cut calories the closer you get to the show, because your body hasn't adapted to you taking in a large amount of calories. And you never want to, when you sacrifice food, you sacrifice muscle. Always remember that. So you want to always have your body in a good place where when you're in prep, you don't really have to cut as much. And in all of my preps, I've never went completely carbless. There's always carbs in my diet. But as I said before, it's just that learning process that I learned. I have to take my off season just as serious as I take my prep, because then it makes the prep that much easier. But there's still moments where I'm starving and I'm hungry because the metabolism is just firing on all cylinders. Everything you're eating is being utilized and your body is just firing. So always play around. Make your food the last thing you adjust. So as you're cutting down, you're not sacrificing any muscle. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool, cool. Anybody else?
So when you're cutting, and like say you're getting like cravings and stuff, how do you handle that?
So my coach allows me one free meal in a prep a week, provided how my week goes and my weight and how I look. And I'm a foodie, so I love donuts, cookies, muffins, French fries, potato chips, you name it. I love it. It is very, very difficult for me. So when I'm in my off season, if I want to eat something outside of my plan, I will. But what I've learned to do is eat it with my food. Same thing in a prep, because what it does is it helps you from binging. Because typically whenever so I can eat a whole pack of Oreos in one setting, literally. I'll eat a whole pack. So instead of eating a whole pack of Oreos, I'll eat my food and then I'll eat a little bit of Oreos, maybe a row. Because then and sometimes I eat enough food that I probably will eat 4 or 5 cookies. So my cravings are different, but I'll eat them with my food. So then that way I get the craving out of the way. And then as you know too, I don't like to call free meals cheat meals. I like to call them reboots or free meals. Because when you do them the right way, it just reboots your metabolism. You feel a nice, good burst of energy. And then I always will drop 2 to 3 pounds after a free meal when I'm in a prep, because it'll help with a plateau as well. So that's pretty much how I control it. So if I'm tweaking cookies all week, when I get my free meal, I'll have some cookies. Sometimes it's just any kind of dessert. I'll go out to eat and I'll eat a dessert with my food. And that's the best way. Something else I do too, I have a pantry in my house. So when I go in the grocery store, I hate going to the grocery store when I'm in prep because I see all the things I can't eat. But if I see something that I want, I'll buy it and I'll just put it away. So when I can have it, I have it. And it kind of helps my mindset. And from that standpoint, I got some questions for you guys. Does anybody else have any questions? No? So y'all, are you competing too? No? You're just here. She's like, no. So what division are you guys doing? Classic. All 3 of you guys classic? Cool. Did you get, so I'm assuming you guys already started prepping, right?
Roughly, mine starts by next week.
Next week. How many weeks out is the show?
It's April 2nd.
April 2nd. I want to try to come back up and watch. As long as I'm in town, I want to come back up and check you guys out. Do you guys have coaches?
No.
Posing coaches?
No.
All right. Is this your first competition?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't get a coach until my 3rd competition. My first 2 shows, I just wanted to compete. And like I said, I didn't know anything about bodybuilding. I really didn't know anything about nutrition and diet as well. I didn't understand how important diet and nutrition was. So I'm gonna tell you guys a funny story. So my current coach, I competed against him in my first win in his last bodybuilding competition. So I was getting ready for my 3rd show. About 5 weeks out, I'm starting to panic because I'm about to go into my 3rd show with no coach. And I really wanted to win. So a buddy of mine referred me to Morgan. And I have trust issues with people. It's very difficult for me to trust people. So I wasn't too high on getting a coach, you know what I mean? Because I just wasn't really familiar with the process. So my boy Huddy was just like, Doug, I'm telling you, man, he can help you. So I was like, all right, I'll give him a shot. So I called him and he had me meet him at a gym. And I've heard horror stories of having a coach who also competes. Because unfortunately, some people they're just not good people. You know what I mean? And there are some coaches who have coached people and sabotaged the people that they coach to win the show. So I knew this going in to go meet Morgan. And he had me come so I could pose for him. He wanted to see what I looked like, to see if he could help me. So I go to the gym, we go up to the posing room, and little did I know he was prepping for the same show. I didn't know. So he takes his clothes off and he starts posing. He's big as hell. I'm like, oh my God, he's freaking huge. Shredded, you know what I mean? And so then he's like, all right, now it's your turn, you pose. So then I pose for him. He shakes his head, he's talking to his buddies. And he goes, I can help you. He said, but I got some good news and I got some bad news. And I said, well, just tell me the bad news. He said, the bad news is we're doing the same show. I'm like, fuck. My heart hit my nuts. I'm like, what the hell? This is what I didn't want. You know what I mean? He said, but the good news is you're probably going to beat me. And I'm like, ain't no way I'm going to beat you. The way he looked at the time was why I felt though I needed a coach, because I didn't think that I looked good enough to be able to win a show. So he starts talking to me in bodybuilding terms. He's like, your lat insertions, your sweep. And I'm like, man, what are you talking about, man? Like, so he said, I can help you. He said, I'm gonna email your meals. He said, and I don't want you to do no cardio or no weight training for 3 days. Automatically, my anxiety kicks in. I'm like, dude, the show's in 5 weeks. You want me to take a break? You know what I mean? He's like, your legs are inflamed. You've been doing cardio for 16 weeks. He said, you need a break. I didn't even know what that meant. I'm like, what do you mean my legs are inflamed? So he recorded me while I was posing, and then he sent me my meals. So he told me no lifting, no cardio for 3 days. And then he sent me my food, and it was way more food than I had been eating up to that point. So now I really start to panic. And I call him. I said, dude, I can't eat all this food. I'm gonna get fat. He said, no, you're not. He said, you gotta trust me, Doug. He said, you gotta keep it 100 with me on the diet. So I'm like, well, I already done paid you, so I guess I gotta trust you, right? So long story short, show day comes. I win the light heavy, he wins the super heavyweight, and we're battling it out for the overall victory, and I won. And I couldn't believe that I actually won. It was, at that point, it was probably one of the greatest feelings I'd ever felt in my life. I had never won anything in the individual sport. I wrestled, I won football championships, but that's a team. You know what I mean? I've never won a wrestling championship, a karate tournament or anything like that. So I never had that experience of winning something where only one person wins. And I just remember him after that show. He said, man, I can look at your body and I know what to do better with you than I do with my own body. And there were times in that prep where I would get done working out. And one time he said, after I got done working out, he said, I want you to go to a Sheetz or a Gecko. I want you to get a steak hoagie, a Rice Krispie treat. And I'm like, for what? I'm like, why has this dude got me? In my mind, those things are bad during a prep, right? But what I learned is food is fuel. As long as you're eating things in the right way, it's actually gonna help you. So that particular day, he told me to eat a steak hoagie and he told me to get a cookie. And I remember I tore it up. I swallowed it. I didn't even chew it. You know what I mean? It was so good. And I remember I'm riding home and I'm looking at my arms and the veins are just coming out of everywhere. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And he had me pose for him an hour later and he's like, good. He said, go back to your meal plan, eat everything like I've been telling you. And that was when I learned I was under eating. So because I wasn't giving my body enough food, the process was counterproductive, right? So my body's holding on to water and holding on to fat because I'm not giving my body enough. So I say all of that to say this is you guys' first competition, that's fine. If you guys want to continue forward, definitely get a coach. It's great to have an extra set of eyes, somebody with more knowledge than you, to not only help you win, but to also teach you in the process, right? That's one thing that I loved about Morgan. Morgan, whatever I ask him, he teaches me. You know, he's not like, just do this just because I say to do it. He can actually explain to me why he wants me to eat a Rice Krispie treat or why I shouldn't have a free meal. And, you know, he single-handedly helped change my life. And he also gave me a different perspective on food. Because prior to him, I looked at food like the majority of people. Eat less, you lose weight, right? That's how most people think. And when I initially started losing my weight, I did too much cardio and I underate. And I was never happy with the way that I looked because I wasn't eating enough food. So to your point, everybody's body is different. Everybody's activity levels are different. The way that they train. So it's really good to keep a log of how your body responds to certain foods. Like I'm a potato guy, right? My complex carbs, I like red potatoes and sweet potatoes. Rice isn't really anything that I particularly like. I'll eat it, but I like to eat it after I train. For whatever reason, I don't know, when I'm drinking a lot of water and I eat rice before I train, it makes me feel like my stomach is bloated. But some people have the opposite effect with potatoes. You know, some people have, and I'm also a texture guy. If I don't like the way something feels in my mouth, I don't like to eat it. If you guys like the experience and you guys like to compete, find a coach. Same thing with posing. Posing is extremely important. I've been to tons of bodybuilding competitions where I see a guy who should win or a lady who should win, but they can't pose. Best physique there, and they lose to somebody because they can't present their package right on stage. They're shaking, or they just don't look good when they're posing. When I won the Toronto Pro, I beat their previous winner. The guy was coming back to win it again, to retain his title, to go back to the Olympia. He was way bigger than me, but he couldn't pose for nothing. So I outposed him. And I won across the board, every judge. So posing is extremely important. I'm pretty sure you guys watch a lot of the pros. It's good to watch a lot of the pros. Practice your transitions, right? So when you hit a pose, practice how you get into the other pose and not look robotic, right? And you want your posing to be effortless when you're on stage. When you watch the great posers like C-Bum, he makes hitting a vacuum look easy. Terrence Ruffin, they make it look easy. It is not, especially when you're trying to hit those poses on stage. You're trying to bring out your separation in your body with your legs. It is extremely difficult to hold those vacuums. So practice that stuff as much as possible, and practice posing in the mirror. Record yourself. I'm a posing coach. I help people pose. If you guys got Instagram, you can follow me on Instagram. I always give tips. I respond back to my DMs. I get a lot of people who are always surprised when I respond back. But I respond back to my DMs. I love to help. I once was in your shoes when I did my first bodybuilding competition. And I remember being backstage at the Pittsburgh. I didn't know anybody back there. There were people who knew people back there. I was back there by myself. I didn't have a coach. I didn't know anybody. So I know what it's like to get ready for a bodybuilding competition, especially it being your first one. May being a little bit nervous. And that's what's cool at Slippery Rock. You guys have a bodybuilding competition. My first competition was the Pittsburgh. It's one of the biggest shows in Pennsylvania. I didn't know that. I didn't know that there were other smaller local shows that you can do to kind of build up your confidence before you go and do a Pittsburgh. Because people that compete in the Pittsburgh are coming from Maryland, West Virginia, New York, New Jersey. People come in, Ohio, they come in from everywhere to compete at the Pittsburgh. So that's just my advice to you guys. I think that you guys are on the right track. You don't necessarily need a coach, but it'll help take away the thinking. It's so cool when Morgan sends me my plans. I just eat this and train like this. All right, bet I could do that. I could follow instructions really, really good. So if you just tell me what to do, I can do it. There's a quote that I live by. A really good linebacker named Sam Mills, played for the Carolina Panthers. He's one of the shortest linebackers in NFL history. He has a famous quote. He says, "I want to be the last person to know how good I'm doing and the first person to know how bad I'm doing." If you can take on that moving forward with everything that you do, you'll be surprised at how successful you'll be at everything, right? Because it's easy to enhance your strengths, but how many people are willing to enhance their weaknesses? You know, that's like for me at the Olympia. The Olympia was the first time I experienced not being in the first call out. It was very humbling. It was very, very humbling. Standing in the back and watching guys out there pose, and I'm not in that first call out. So I'm glad that I got that experience. It sucked that it had to come on the Olympia stage, but you know, I was competing against the greatest 212 bodybuilders in the world. There was guys there from Japan, UK, Australia, you name it. They were from everywhere, which was a very, very cool experience. But good luck to you guys, and don't be afraid to ask me questions, man. Like he knows. You know, he reached out to me and asked me to come up. I had no problem with that, man, because, you know, for me, if I'm not giving back and I'm not helping the younger generation, then, you know, I'm pretty much just a waste, and I don't want to be that. You know, I want to help people achieve whatever it is that they want in life. I want you guys to know that you can achieve anything that you want, but you have to be willing to work hard for it. You know, it's one thing to say you want to be something, but it's another thing to put action behind it. You know, I tell my kids, you can't be whatever you want to be. You can only be whatever you're willing to work hard for. So if you want to be a professional football player, you better be willing to work hard for it, because only 1% of the people in the world get to do that. You know, only 1% of the people in the world get to compete in the Olympia. You know, there's professional bodybuilders who have never won a bodybuilding competition, never competed at the Olympia stage. I was fortunate enough to be able to do it. 4th person in Pittsburgh ever since 1965. So, and there's been a lot of professional bodybuilders coming out of Pittsburgh, a lot of decorated bodybuilders, Mr. USAs, you know, national champions, you know. So for me to have the opportunity to compete at the Olympia was amazing. And, you know, hopefully you guys gained something from listening to me talk today. I don't want to ramble on too long. I know I've been keeping you guys here that long, but if there's no other questions, and you know, you guys can get on with the rest of your meeting. Any